This presentation is supposed to give you a brief overview of the workings of the endocrine system. So let's get started. And first off, the endocrine system is the secondary control system of the body. The nervous system is the other control system. Nervous system is quick acting but short lived responses, whereas the endocrine system is slow acting but longer responses. Some can last minutes, some can last days. So, the endocrine system uses chemicals that are hormones that are released into the bloodstream and then carried from their site of origin to a specific set of cells which will take the hormone up. Actually, hormones are very site specific and organ specific in how they work. So, even though we're flooding the bloodstream with the hormones, it will only work on certain organs that have the appropriate receptor site. Now, hormones control all sorts of major body processes, reproduction being one, growth and development, and we'll talk about some conditions that can arise if those hormones do not work properly, mobilization of body defenses, maintenance of homeostasis, and that's really what the control systems are about, is keeping us within a certain range and keeping us alive, and then regulation of metabolism as a whole. So, overview, hormones are produced by specialized cells. These cells secrete hormones into the fluids that are outside of them. Ultimately, this gets into the bloodstream where the blood transfers to target organs, and then those hormones regulate the activity of those other cells within that organ. Just the general chemistry of hormones, we have several classifications. We have protein hormones, which are also water soluble, so they travel nicely through the bloodstream. We have, within those amino acid base, there are peptides, and a peptide is just another term for a protein. And amines, which are single individual amino acids, and some of those can be released locally to cause a response. Then we have steroid hormones, and these are made from cholesterol. And we have prostaglandins, which are made in cells. These can be released when the cells are damaged. So let's talk about, first off, the mechanisms of these. Hormones only affect certain tissues or organs, target cells, and again, very specific in the way they work. We have insulin, which is released by the beta cells of the adrenal gland, and this actually attaches to most of the cells of the body, but it will allow them to take in the sugars necessary for cell function. Target cells must have a specific receptor to pick up the hormone. And let's give a different example. There is luteinizing hormone, which is released from the pituitary, and it functions on the ovaries to prepare the cell or prepare the zygote for release. And that hormone doesn't really react to any other cells. So that target cell, in that case, the cells in the ovaries have a specific protein receptor that will pick up the luteinizing hormone. And the hormone binding site alters that cellular activity. Now, effects caused by hormones are variable. They can do a lot of different things. So they can change the plasma membrane permeability or the electrical state. So they can result in the cell being able to pick up more stuff or release more stuff or change the charge on the cell. They are involved in the synthesis of proteins, such as enzymes, activation or inactivation of enzymes, the stimulus of mitosis, so growth hormone is associated with increased growth, particularly during puberty, promotion of secretory activity. So hormones that are released can, for instance, function on the kidney, causing it to secrete more fluids. Now, there are two mechanisms in which hormones act, and there is direct gene activation, and then there is the second messenger system. So, a little bit about each of those. The direct gene activation is done by steroid hormones. Steroid hormones pass through the cell membrane, get into the nucleus, bind to a part of the DNA which causes that particular protein to be produced. So it goes something like this. We've got a steroid hormone, goes through the cytoplasm, goes in, binds to the receptor protein, which binds to the DNA, causing the production of messenger RNA and the production of new hormone or new protein. Now, second messenger systems, these are the non-protein, basically, or non-steroid. These are basically protein hormones. And the hormone, in this case, will bind to a membrane receptor. The hormone does not enter the cell, but it sets off some reactions that activate enzymes. And those enzymes then catalyze a reaction that produces a second messenger molecule, which is released into the cell. And then that causes specific cellular changes to promote specific responses. So it looks more like this. We have a receptor site and we have a non-steroid hormone, basically protein, amine, or other. It binds. It causes then a protein, such as an enzyme, to activate, which changes, in this case, ATP to cyclic AMP, which is our second messenger. Now, you don't need to know ATP to cyclic AMP as part of this process. Just know that nonsteroid hormones bind to receptors on the surface of the cell. Steroid hormones bind to DNA specifically. Now, the next few slides simply list various glands that our body has and the hormones that they produce and the class that they are and what they do. So I know it's a lot of rote memorization, but you need to go through and make sure that you know what hormone is produced, such as oxytocin, where it is produced, and what it does. So I'm going to skip past these next few slides because this is all memorization on your part. And we'll go to control of the release of hormones. And this is negative feedback. For all intents and purposes, we are releasing a hormone to try to move the body back into a certain range. Once it gets moved to that range, then we stop the release of the hormone. So stimulus or low hormone levels in the blood can trigger the release of more hormone. Hormone release stops once the appropriate level in the blood is reached. Now, hormonal stimulation of endocrine glands is the most common stimuli. Endocrine glands are activated by other hormones. For example, we have anterior pituitary hormones that will act on other glands. An example here, we have the hypothalamus, which regulates the pituitary. The anterior pituitary secretes hormones which will function on the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands, or the testes to stimulate those glands to do their job. So it's sort of a multi-step process here, but we're getting a hormone released to cause another hormone to be made or to cause one of these structures to do something. Now, humoral stimuli, and humoral just means stuff that's in the bloodstream. The humors are things in the bloodstream. So, changing blood levels of certain ions, for instance, can cause hormone release. Calcium levels in the blood, for instance, very critical that we have the appropriate amount of calcium in the bloodstream. So, we have a couple of hormones that are involved in either causing the bones to take up calcium or release calcium into the bloodstream. Some examples here: parathyroid hormone, calcitonin, that is one associated with calcium, or insulin. And with insulin, blood sugar levels have to remain within a certain range. If we do not have a sufficient quantity of blood sugar, or we have an excess, actually, if we have an excess of blood sugar, then what will happen is the insulin will get released and cause the cells to take in the sugars. So here we have an example. We have calcium of a certain concentration. We have low calcium, which goes to the parathyroid glands and causes the parathyroid glands to release parathyroid hormone, which results in bone releasing calcium into the bloodstream. We also have neural stimulation of endocrine glands, and I think everybody has probably had that adrenaline rush where you see something or you experience something that scares you, and just like 30 seconds later, you break out in a cold sweat, you feel energy, you may even get a little shaky as a product of that. And what has happened is that the nerve has stimulated the adrenal gland to release the hormone, which acts on sites all over the body. So in this case, you can see central nervous system. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight nervous system, which signals to the adrenal medulla, which causes a release in the bloodstream of the catecholamines, which is another term for adrenaline. Now, there are major endocrine organs, and I showed you that table earlier, but know these organs, know the hormones that they release, and be able to identify the activity of those hormones. Now, the hormones, the glands are scattered all over the body. And so, for instance, we can have a hormone that's in the pituitary gland, which ends up working on the testes or the ovaries, etc. This is just a really quick summary of everything that the endocrine system does. We will talk about conditions associated with the endocrine insufficiencies of different hormones and how those impact the body in a later presentation.